everyone. Welcome back to Behind the Numbers. I'm Dave Bookbinder, Senior Director at CFGI. This is the program where we dig deeper to understand what really matters most in business. And today we're going to be talking about the changing and evolving role of the Chief Financial Officer. And I'm pleased to welcome my guest today, Jim Caruso, who's the Chief Financial Officer at Simplura Health Group. Jim, welcome to Behind the Numbers.
Thanks, Dave. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. Before we jump into the conversation, why don't you just tell the audience briefly about who you are and maybe a little bit about your company?
Sure. Well, again, Jim Caruso. I'm Chief Financial Officer of Simplura Health Group, and Simplura is a home healthcare company. What we provide are what's referred to as non-medical services. So we assist people with the activities of daily living. So elderly people that need companionship, housekeeping, maybe help getting to and from the doctor, meal preparation, things of that nature. Largely a Medicaid population. We operate in 7 states. We're private equity backed. We have about 14,000 employees and a number of different brands that we operate under in different regions.
Thank you for that. Well, we're going to be talking about, as I mentioned in the opening, the evolving role of the CFO. So you've been a CFO for a while, and I wanted to start with asking you about what you've seen in terms of the evolution. When I'm working with CFOs on a day-to-day basis, it seems like they're taking on more than just, we'll call it the financial stewardship of an organization. They're involved with infotech, they're involved with HR and other things. What are you seeing? What's been your experience?
Well, my experience is that the role has definitely gotten much broader. I like to describe it as almost like a conciliary type of role, to be an advisor to the CEO in multiple areas. And it's different, of course, from company to company. It depends, is there a chief operating officer and a president below the CEO? If not, that really opens up the opportunity for the CFO to really step more into operations, to be more strategic, to handle HR and IT, as you mentioned. Sometimes the CFO will have direct tangible responsibility for those functions on an org chart. Even if not, they're always involved in them because finance is the hub for so many different things in an organization that he or she can't help but be involved in those areas.
Yeah, and you're involved in both, right? Both in IT and HR?
I am, correct.
So what's that been like for you as you started to dip your toes into those, we'll call them maybe unfamiliar waters?
Well, HR is very challenging because of all of the regulations and compliance aspects, particularly around ACA. So it's been helpful to have a team internally that really knows the ins and outs, and to have some good outside advisors as well on the benefits front, for example. On the IT side, similarly, a CFO is not a technologist, so I rely on the IT team to really understand the applications, the data, the infrastructure, and really to just be a strategic partner to them, to help them to understand what do we need to run the business, to report the numbers. Everything is becoming more data focused with big data. How do we mine that? How do we get to what we need? How do we cut through the complexity? So, there's definitely has to be a partnership there between finance and IT. They're absolutely inseparable.
Yeah. Do you have other functions reporting to you as well besides IT and HR?
No, that's about it.
Okay.
From a technical standpoint. But again, as CFO, I have the opportunity to get into anything and everything. In fact, it was a lot of fun to be part of the group that rebranded the company a couple of years ago. Simplura was a new rebrand for us, so that was fun to be a part of as well. I'm one of the few CFOs that likes marketing and thinks we ought to be spending more money on it. So
that is interesting. And speaking of liking to spend money, normally the finance function is kind of the enemy of HR from that perspective of spend. What's been your experience so far in working with your HR team?
No, I think we work well together. I think, at least for me personally, I think the employee experience is very important. So, you can't do that without being cost conscious, right? I mean, there's always more money that you could spend, but there are so many things you can do for employees that don't even necessarily cost the company a lot of money, like making sure they have 401k benefits, other ancillary voluntary benefit programs they can participate in, helping drive engagement among employees and making sure they have a good experience and opportunities to learn. There are so many things you can do that don't even have to cost a lot of money.
Yeah, very, very true. When you talk about getting the right people on your team, I mean, obviously that's critical. As a CFO, you're not expected day to day to know all the ins and outs of, we'll call it an HR function per se. It's important to have the right person in that seat. How do you go about thinking about constructing a good team, and what do you look for in the individuals that you're talking to?
Well, the right team is critical, as Jim Collins famously talked about, right? Getting the right people in the right seats, and I'm blessed to have a great team. But what I look for when I'm hiring or promoting, my number one attribute is intellectual curiosity. I think that somebody has to want to learn, be devoted to lifetime learning, and reads a lot and is really open to new experiences. Somebody that really wants to understand why they need to do things and is not mechanical, and somebody that can really think outside the box and come up with creative solutions no matter what level they're at. I think intellectual curiosity is critical for driving engagement, because I think engagement is about wanting to spend some of your discretionary time on your job and wanting to be better. And I think that intellectual curiosity is a key driver of that. Now, not everybody that has intellectual curiosity is necessarily engaged. They may have curiosity about everything other than work. So it's still up to the leaders of the business to drive that engagement and to really leverage that engagement on the job. But I think intellectual curiosity is critical. I also think work ethic is critical. Having a positive attitude, a good sense of humor, communication ability. As you can see, I'm going more for the intangibles.
Oh,
because
yeah, totally.
I think the technical skills can always be taught. Now, of course, at higher levels, right, you expect them to have certain knowledge and experience. But, I think at least for entry-level hires, the intangibles are critical. I believe they're innate. You either have them or you don't. But the technical can always be taught. And if somebody has the right attitude, they can learn anything.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. You are preaching to the choir on that one, as they say. When I talk to candidates, it's exactly what I'm looking for. The technical piece that can be taught. It's all those intangible folks. And as a valuation guy who spends a lot of time valuing intangible assets, believe me, that resonates. You talk about engagement, and I just want to go there just for a little bit, if you don't mind, because in my book we talk a lot about engagement. In the social media, there's a lot of discussion about engagement. Gallup has said basically that roughly only 1 out of every 3 employees is engaged. It's really, really low. And you talked about discretionary effort, and that's where the magic happens. That's where you get innovation. And there's been a lot written and said about how you actually inspire folks to deliver that discretionary effort. What's your secret sauce? What have you found that's worked?
Well, I think that creating a sense of purpose is really the critical aspect to drive engagement. People need to feel that they're connected to something bigger than themselves. They need to have a reason to get out of bed in the morning. I think in what we're doing in home health care, really serving people, helping the frail elderly, allowing them to age in place in their own homes with dignity, which is where they want to be. We're doing something so good from a social service standpoint that it's very easy to help create that sense of purpose. Our caregivers are driven by that, and they're all compassionate people. When it comes to the finance function, there may be the tendency to be a little bit disconnected from that, right? Because we're not on the front line caring for people. And that could be the case in any business, right? No matter how altruistic or how much of a mission and vision and purpose there is for the company, the finance team may feel disconnected from that because they're in the background. It's easier for me as CFO to feel part of it because I'm part of the executive team and working with the CEO and involved in different aspects of the business. But it's important for me to make sure my team feels connected to that. So I'm sure to talk about it as often as I can. remind people what we're doing, the good we're doing, and their connection to it. That if we don't keep the company profitable and generating cash, it won't survive, and we can't do what we're doing. That we're responsible for making sure the caregivers get paid on time. That's a service we're providing to them. We have other internal customers. The business unit leaders are our customers. So what can we do to support them and help them? So we may have an indirect role, but it's no less critical.
Yeah. Jim, for the folks who are watching and listening and want to learn more about you or your company, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Well, you can look for me on LinkedIn. I'm actually there under James Caruso, even though my friends call me Jim. And you can also reach me by email at jcaruso, and you can see the spelling of my name on screen, jcaruso@simplura.com.
Awesome. Thank you. So as a CFO, you have the wonderful responsibility of being a role model for an organization. How important is mentorship to you as a leader?
Well, it's very important to me, and I would have to say I probably fall short in terms of the amount of time that I spend on it. I think it's very important, and I aspire to be a good mentor, and I don't want to sit here and tell you that I'm always the best mentor or coach, but I think it is critical, and it connects to your question about engagement, because people won't feel engaged if they don't feel that I care about them and their development, and if I'm not there to connect them to the larger purpose and vision of the company.
Yeah.
So I think it's critical, especially in a middle market company. I've worked in CPA firms, I've worked in larger companies where that infrastructure and development path is more clear cut. In a middle market company, it's not as clear cut. There might not be as many levels available. There might not be, you may have somebody ahead of you that isn't going anywhere anytime soon. So it's really important to make sure that people have opportunities to learn in their current role, that they're able to move laterally if they're interested in doing so, and to really make them see that they have a future and that they believe in that.
Yeah, you touched on so many things there, and I would just say don't beat yourself up, because you've got the core philosophy down that I think most of your employees would really relish, and you are a role model from that perspective. So they get it, and just in terms of the way you behave and your philosophy that you espouse. So good on you for that. Right. Can we shift gears and talk a little bit about the finance function and maybe how COVID-19 has impacted that? I work a lot with CFOs in our day-to-day business, and a number of them right now are going through a reassessment of how COVID's going to be impacting their business. Reforecasting, which has been a huge issue. What's going on with you in that regard, and how do you view this whole reforecasting in this post or current COVID-19 environment?
Well, when this first happened, the idea of reforecasting was overwhelming. I didn't know where to start, because we had no idea how steep the slide might be, how long it would last. There were some public companies in our industry or similar industries that actually were not putting guidance out. Others that were putting guidance out, so that was a little bit of a benchmark there, to look at what they were saying, how much they were going to be down. There were some industry groups that we participate in where we were able to get some intelligence about where some of our competitors were heading and what they were forecasting. So that helped give us some, guideposts there, and to get a sense for what might be coming, and of course our own experience as we saw it. So our investors were, very understanding about the uncertainty. They didn't push us to have a forecast to them within the first week of this happening. Neither did our lenders, who were also supportive. We communicated regularly. They wanted to see what was happening on a week-by-week basis, but they didn't put a lot of pressure on us to reforecast quickly. Ultimately, it was something we had to do, obviously. So by that time, I would say about a month after the national emergency was declared, we started to see a bottoming out. So we had, lost some volume, but we saw it start to flatten, and we weren't losing any more volume. And that gave us some comfort to say, okay, we're going to hold at this level. Let's be conservative and say maybe we'll hold here for 2 or 3 months, but then we should be able to start growing again, say in the August, September timeframe. And of course, now we're growing off a slightly lower base, so we're not going to be back to our original budget, but at least our growth rate should start to recover from where we are today. So ultimately, we were able to put that reforecast together, and we think 2021 we should be pretty much back to where we originally thought before this all happened.
Amen. I hope that's the case. And it's interesting that you mentioned that your investors and lenders haven't been pushing you. And I get it that businesses need to do their forecasting and scenario planning and so forth so that they can have a clearer, I use that term in air quotes, clearer vision of where things are headed, especially in this environment. But a number of my clients, interestingly enough, were getting pushed to do forecasting, reforecasting by either their audit teams or their investors. And when the conversations were happening and the client would push back on that, admittedly, the folks who were requesting the forecast had no greater visibility than the client. So
Right.
it's kind of an irony there. So I wish that you get more clarity on that going forward, and I imagine it's going to be one of those things that you're just going to keep revisiting periodically, and it's going to be a living document.
Exactly, and it has to be. It
Yeah.
needs to be a dynamic. It should, even in the best of times, planning should really be a dynamic process. I think the days of annual budgets are over. Disrupting the everybody in the business for 3 months to put a budget together. I think it should be rolling 18-month forecasts and always keeping that horizon going.
Yeah, being adaptive and responding to what's going on, not to mention being proactive and taking advantage of opportunities. Couldn't agree more. I just got a signal we only have a few minutes to go in this first segment, but continuing on this conversation of COVID, one of the big impacts right now that everybody's facing is remote workforces. People are now working from home. Leaders are trying to figure out how to manage that team, keep the engagement up. How have you and your colleagues handled the work from home, remote work scenario and keeping teams engaged?
Well, first I have to say that we have over 50 branch offices where that are client-facing, so people that are schedulers and case managers and really liaise between our clients and the caregivers. So a lot of those folks have continued to be at work every day as essential business workers. So I applaud them for that. From a corporate standpoint, we have had a remote work arrangement, and it's worked fantastically well. First, it's a tribute to the team that they were able to keep things going without missing a beat. We were able to get through an entire financial statement audit remotely, close the books on time remotely, bill and collect. Pay bills, everything's gone perfectly. We really haven't missed a beat. That's a testament to the team and also to the IT team. We've had a cloud-first strategy. All our critical enterprise applications are cloud-based, so people have been able to work from home. We tested it out before we had to do it, and in some cases we had to get people laptops if they didn't already have them. But we did all that, and we haven't missed a beat. It's worked out pretty well. It's difficult for people more socially because they miss the collaboration and being together, and I especially feel bad for people that are either, they live alone, so they're working all day and they couldn't even really go anyplace at night. In the past, maybe they would have gone to, out with friends or done something, right? But now they're stuck at home all day and night. People that have young kids at home, trying to get them through school and work at the same time. So, it's been tough for a lot of people from that standpoint. But we've tried to keep people engaged, do things like just have a conference call every couple of weeks with the team with no business agenda, just to say, what's everybody doing? How are you making out? What are you going to try to do this weekend now that things are opening up? What do you have planned? What are you most looking forward to doing when things reopen? Throwing questions out there. Had a couple of fun Zoom meetings here and there. I try to reach out and call people. I speak to my direct reports, obviously, but even reaching down a level or two below my direct reports just to, make a call and see how people are doing or use chat, things like that.
That's good. In about the 60 seconds we have left here, just want to kind of close this segment on a leadership overview. Like, what have you learned, any aha moments during this COVID thing as a leadership teachable moment, if you will?
Well, really observing our CEO and how he's always been sure to make sure that everybody appreciated what everybody was doing, that he realized how hard it was and that it wasn't easy, and he was always telling people how, even a few levels down, how much he appreciated everything they were doing. letting them know how much our private equity firm appreciated it, and really just making sure that everybody felt, you know, like we were a team and we would get through it. I mean, people have to believe. You don't know how it's going to go, right? It's all uncharted waters, but making people believe that we're going to get through it together, I think, is critical.
Amen. On that note, we're going to pause and take a quick commercial break, pay a few bills. We will be right back on Behind the Numbers. Don't go anywhere.
Number 7. Number 8.
9 regular. Oh, wait. 13 giant. The usual?
Of course. Number 1.
Jersey Mike's, a sub above.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Behind the Numbers. I'm Dave Bookbinder, and today we're talking about the evolving role of the CFO with Jim Caruso, who's the Chief Financial Officer at Simplura Health Group. I want to start this second segment by giving you an opportunity to brag just a little bit. I had reached out to Jim after seeing that he had been recognized with the CFO of the Year award. And anytime a CFO gets recognized with an award like that, it resonates with me because they're usually doing some pretty cool things besides just, as I mentioned in the first segment, the financial stewardship. So I want to give you a moment here. I know that you're humble and you don't want to talk about it much, but tell the audience just a little bit about that experience and the award.
Well, it was definitely an honor and a great experience, and you know, one of the best things that came out of it was you and I getting connected and being able to do this. So, you know, the recognition is definitely a good thing, and it was appreciated. You know, it's you wouldn't be human if you didn't enjoy seeing yourself in the Philadelphia Business Journal, right, with your picture there, and even a giant cardboard cutout at the event, which was pretty interesting. But, you know, I mean, the recognition was appreciated. You know, it's nice to be recognized by peers. I mean, I had, you know, having been in professional services prior to the CFO role, I had gone to that event in the past, and you know, always thought it was pretty cool that CFOs were being recognized as a key C-level executive position, and that these individuals had been recognized. And I always wondered how one went about getting that recognition. So it was nice to receive and to be honored by peers. But, you know, I couldn't have done it without a great CEO that I work for and a great team that I work with, and not just on my finance team, but in IT and HR and other areas of the company. And, you know, for every one of us that won, there's, you know, how many, you know, hundreds of CFOs toiling in obscurity. So I think they deserve just as much credit as well.
Well, congratulations to you on that. That's quite an achievement. So you mentioned you were in professional services, and you've kind of bobbed and weaved, if you will, in your career in professional services, in-seat CFO, back and forth a couple of times. How has that benefited you? And give me give the audience an overview of kind of the strategic imperatives around that and what you've taken away.
Oh, sure. Well, you know, I think that my time in professional services was phenomenal and enjoyable, and it really broadened me as a CFO. I used to run at least in my most recent professional services stint, I ran a transaction advisory practice and also a financial outsourcing practice. So a lot of the M&A experience that I brought into this role came from that previous role, having seen probably 50 acquisitions, and many of them, you know, that were very dirty, if you will, in terms of, small cash basis businesses without good books and records. So, that was a great experience. And in running a financial outsourcing practice, I saw many different companies in many different industries. So it broadened me from a technical standpoint. But more importantly, it made me entrepreneurial, building these practices, being involved in business development, getting more of a marketing, sales and marketing mindset, building a network. Those were all things that I brought into this current role. I had been a CFO before that as well at another company before going into professional services. So that CFO experience gave me the technical skills to effectively act as a part-time CFO to my clients while I was in professional services. So, everything I did set me up for the next thing. So that was the strategy behind it. And, I think that everything you do gets you to where you are. So, I could look back and say, oh, if I had stayed in professional services, I might have been a partner earlier in my career. If I had stayed in industry, I might have been a CFO earlier in my career. But it doesn't ever pay to second guess things, because everything you do builds on itself. And ultimately, I'm proud to say I was both a partner in public accounting as well as a CFO in industry. So, having reached the top in finance in both a public role and an industry role. So, I'm happy with the way everything worked out. And every experience brings something to the table, and the idea is to bring, shape your own role and bring what you most enjoyed from your prior experiences and use those to shape your current role.
Yeah, and bringing those perspectives into each of the other roles certainly helps, as you said. Read something recently about who is likely to be the heir apparent to a CEO, and the CFO is the number one name for taking that role ultimately. What's your thought on that?
Well, I hope it's true. I think it's something that most people aspire to. I think being a CEO is the pinnacle of a career, in industry. Whether you become one by being an entrepreneur or by being a CEO of a company, I think it's the pinnacle of a career as far as goals for a lot of people. I think the article you cite is great news for CFOs that do aspire to that role. There are other schools of thought that say you really need to have P&L responsibility before becoming a CEO, and that CFOs may come up short in that regard. So there's a couple of different schools of thought out there, but I think as we talked about the role of the CFO and just how multidimensional it is, and how close of a relationship there is to the CEO, you have a bird's eye seat to learn about leadership and to see the entire company. So personally, I think it is the ideal move. I think CFOs are in general very well positioned for that role.
Yeah, I happen to agree with you on that front. How can the audience reach out to you if they want to learn more, if they want to have a conversation with you?
They can email me directly at the company, J. Caruso, Caruso, at Simplura.com. And again, you can look me up on LinkedIn, but I'm there under James Caruso, not Jim, although my friends all call me Jim.
Jim, we only have a couple minutes to go here. Time goes very, very quickly. I wanted to ask you, since the topic of the conversation was the evolving role of the CFO, looking into your crystal ball, where do you see the CFO role expanding into the future?
Well, in the future, finance in general is going to change drastically because it's becoming so data-driven, as we talked about. People in finance are going to need to have intimate knowledge of data mining, data visualization. They're going to need to be partners to the business unit leaders to help them make good decisions. They need to be able to communicate financial information to non-financial people. They need to have a view that's beyond finance, beyond their companies, but is wider about the economy, about the industry, about the world in general. And it's up to the CFO to lead them to that place. The CFO doesn't have to be a technologist, him or herself, but needs to be able to lead the team in a time of drastic change and to help people reinvent themselves. And I think that requires, the good news is it requires timeless leadership principles. I don't think the future CFO is that different than in the past, because I think the principles of leadership are timeless. Being able to drive engagement and a sense of purpose, and being able to build trust among the team, and being authentic, showing people you care about them, helping them develop, making sure they get the coaching and mentoring and training that they need, showing them the way, showing them a vision that they can get on board, and showing them that things will be okay when times get stressful, that we'll all get through it as a team, we'll get through COVID as a team, we'll do everything as a team. I think that's what leaders have always had to do going back, centuries. So in that regard, I think a CFO's role is all about leadership, regardless of how much finance or technology might change.
Well said. And on that note, we have to wrap. So I want to thank Jim Caruso for joining me today. It was a great conversation. Jim, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Dave. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for watching and listening to Behind the Numbers. I'm Dave Bookbinder. If you've enjoyed what you've listened to here, please subscribe. Hit the subscribe button, and you'll stay in touch with all that we're doing going forward, and you'll know when new episodes drop. Until we talk again, take care, everybody.